Not yet. But
And good afternoon. I am Reverend Mark Hughes. I am the Executive Director of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, and you caught me again. It's Juxtaposition. Black folks experiencing issues here in the city. What we like to say is they're the issues that are affecting black folks and black folks affecting change. So welcome. I'm so glad you are with me. Tonight, we're going to, first of all, I just want to start by just sending some thoughts and prayers out to the folks who are experiencing so many challenges with this catastrophic storm that is making Irene look like a child. We want to send our thoughts and prayers out to folks who are impacted in these impacted communities. This is a no-joke time. I was reaching out across the state to folks that I know. I would encourage everybody, let's come together. I appreciate the fact that the senators are also in the state. This is all hands on deck. I want to also give a shout out to our first responders, and let's just continue to pray for one another. That being said, tonight we're going to have some conversation a little bit about equal protection. We know that in the last couple weeks or so that SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, has delivered yet another blow to the rights and the freedoms of black folks in America. The Alliance, what we did is we did in fact put out a press release. We'll cover some of that. I'm excited to let you know that we've got some great guests with us. First of all, we have the director of the Richard Kemp Center here with us today. That is Christine Longmore Hughes. She's with us today, so thank you for joining, Christine. Hi. And also we have Deacon Roy V. Hill II, who is one member of the board of directors here. So, Roy, thank you for coming out. Definitely appreciating your being here.
Thank you, Reverend.
No problem. Hey, I wanted to just share a couple things with you. First of all, everything's rooted in the 14th Amendment. Take a look at this slide right here. I brought a slide of the 14th Amendment with me. Slide up from the control room. And I think that just to kind of root everybody who's watching, we don't have a whole lot of time. First of all, those who are watching, we do not have enough time to tell you all of the twists and turns that goes into this affirmative action, this whole decision and where it's coming from. Not only that, there's probably not enough attention span out there. Thank you for that slide. The Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, what we did was, as I said a moment ago, we issued the press release. Some of that language there, I'll just share with you. The 14th Amendment was intended to rectify the deep-rooted legacy of slavery and the discrimination faced by African Americans in this country. Its original purpose was to ensure equal protection under the law, regardless of race and ethnicity. However, the implementation of the 14th Amendment has been marked by a history of resistance and rejection, undermining its intended impact. Instead of serving as a powerful tool for racial justice, it has been distorted and manipulated to advance agendas contrary to its original purpose. Some pretty strong language. So definitely, I wanted to first of all, just chime in with y'all on the top. First question, and I know we didn't get a chance to talk much about this off air beforehand, but what was your original thought when you first saw this? I know we've had various sessions. We'd anticipated it. We knew it was coming. Roy, what was your first thoughts when you saw the Supreme Court announcing the removal of the remnants, if you will, of affirmative action in I think it was the Harvard University and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill?
Quickly, one, to affirm is to affirm that which is right. To take away that which is right is an injustice. That injustice speaks at the heart of what we say in this country when we say one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. It speaks at and guts what we see in our currency, wherein we say, in God we trust. So if we remove the foundation, then what do we have to actually stand for?
Right. Right. What do we have to stand for? And I think, again, I think there's another slide that's up right now, and I think what we were doing is we're looking forward to it. We pulled some information offline, and we were doing some research. We had, if y'all recall, we had some community discussions on the subject. We've already began to organize. We'll have more about that conversation later. But yeah, a lot of experts, they expect the court's conservative majority, they expected the court's majority to rule against it. And this observation here is colleges and universities will no longer be able to consider race as a part of their admissions decision. The thing I want to highlight more than anything before we go to you, Christine, is that this is, thanks for that slide, what this is when we talk about affirmative actions and what this court did, is this was the last of a sequence of a number of decisions that have been made decade over decade over decade in dismantling systemic racism, or dismantling rather the whole 14th Amendment and affirmative action. What we're talking about right now is we're talking about as it pertains to education. And even now, with the or before with the way that the policy was being implemented, it was only considered to be one of many criteria that can be used. And let me just qualify that. It was already illegal to use it as a sole criteria. And again, we're only talking about the remnants of affirmative action remaining in education. So the thought there is that a lot of people are losing their mind, and the thing is that I think that a large portion of the battle was lost decades ago. Your thoughts?
I guess my first reaction was kind of like, here they go again. There's really nothing new under the sun, and I think that it's really sort of more of the same. At first, I had this reaction of we make a couple of steps forward, and then there's someone or something pushing us back. And then I thought, oh boy, here we go with everybody's going to be running around with their hair on fire, but that doesn't really feel like it makes a lot of sense to me either, because when I thought about it more, I just thought about the history, especially of Black people in this country, where things like this and laws, including the Constitution, where all the laws lead back to, has always been a racist construct. And so what our response and our resilience as Black people and as the descendants of slaves especially, it has often been and has historically been a call to action. Right.
It's historically been a call to action. And as far as who we are as a nation, I think that's something that some forget about. And it's something that many have never embraced in terms of who we are, who we truly are as a nation. This slide that I'm pulling up right now, what it talks about it's talking about the fact that this blow, as I indicated before, it's as you said, here we go again, another gut punch. But this pretty much turns off the lights for this conversation about correcting harms that have been done by this nation, intentionally correcting harms that have been done. And my concern, and I stated this a number of months ago, well, actually it's back last year, is that this also opens the door to challenging all things DEI. Now, of course, what we're facing, what we're looking at is racial justice, and we're having conversations about, the whole idea of justice in our communities, justice in our schools, justice in our economics, justice in our land. In diversity and equity and inclusion has largely been used as a term that's really a little bit more docile and a little bit more palatable inside of organizations and agencies and so forth, just so folks can talk about it. But at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is correcting the harm that's been done. Roy, I know you've been around for a while and you've seen this diversity, equity, inclusion thing playing out in Burlington forever. In fact, I know you were responsible for some of the initial work done with the reparations proclamation of the governor at the statewide level. Do you see this blow as being significant? Have you seen other activities that have occurred on your watch that are comparable?
Yes, and that's a deep, deep well, but we only have so much time to talk about it. But, if we look at the fundamentals, for example, affirmative action has always been around for white people. Their card of their affirmative action pass is white skin. And what we have done, that is, people of goodwill, is say, wait a minute, if we have a state Constitution's motto that says freedom and unity, then we're talking about a comprehensive, inclusive, as opposed to the divisiveness, which has come about by solely focusing on the rights if you are white. Now, what that ruling really says is we don't want the whole of the community of people, to be educated about who we are and what we really, really are.
Well, how is that new? I mean, doesn't that go back to Slavery 101?
Oh, absolutely. It goes back.
So are we regressing then? Is that what it feels like?
It's beyond regressing. It's destructive. Even biblically, in terms of scripture, there's a word that says people perish without education, without knowledge. So systematically, that's what we're doing. We find many children in school now so frustrated by adults, by the teachers, by their parents, until they're actually turning against. So you see AK-15 or whatever that gun is called in the hands of children who are killing their siblings, who are killing their classmates, who are killing adults, etc. And for some reason, baseball players in places like Florida, etc., are refusing to acknowledge what education is about across the board. It benefits everybody.
I don't want to get stuck in education though, because my thought process on this thing is this: as we know, this is much bigger than education. And what the unfortunate part about it is from what I've seen here, because this started with the 14th Amendment, which was the second of the Reconstruction Amendments. You can bring that slide up, control room. So the 14th Amendment was originally intended to protect black folks. It was, and this is little known in our schools. I was talking to some youth yesterday, and nobody knew what reparations was. There's 40 kids in the room. So this is little known, that even though we had a constitution that perpetuated a pre-existing state of slavery with 7 key tenets, at the close of an insurrection, the Civil War, what we tried to fix that with was this 3 simple constitutional amendments, not a constitutional convention. And the 14th Amendment was the second amongst them. And what we know about the 14th Amendment is not only did it essentially, officially declare that black folks were people, humans, but also citizens and deserved equal protection because they were historically being slaughtered in due process. So this is where affirmative action was derived from, because the inequities that were created by slavery, the legacy of slavery. Now, everything's gotten so convoluted over the years, with all of the Supreme Court's decisions. There was also in the 13th Amendment the right for the legislature to establish laws to undo the badges and incidents, if you will, is the language of slavery. What is that? That is the legacy of slavery. That's what That's what we see today, what we refer to as systemic racism. The challenge here is half of America doesn't believe that systemic racism is even a thing. And I'm wondering, Christine, you could bring that slide up, control room. We don't like folks to get off of our program without seeing the definition of systemic racism. I'm wondering, you know, the work you've been at this in Burlington since, you know, I ain't gonna tell on you.
No, it's okay, you can.
But I'm just saying, you know, the language of systemic racism before, leading up until now, during the last number of years, what's your take on it? Have you seen a lot of conversation about it? Are folks embracing this?
No, I haven't necessarily seen a lot of conversation about
Thanks
it.
for that slide.
But and it could be that I'm not necessarily putting myself in positions to hear about it. But I do want to go back to two things that you said. One, I think it is very important to make the distinction between the work of eradicating systemic racism and anti-bias, DEI, like all of that other stuff, because it's really just even in the word. Systemic racism means that we are looking at systems of oppression and trying to dismantle them or change them so that there's a broader impact, whereas all of the DEI stuff has more to do with how it occurred, how racism and oppression occurs on an individual one-to-one basis.
Systems.
And because we know that DEI has turned into an industry, not only has it not produced the progress that it was supposedly intended to produce, we're actually going backwards. So it does really, you know, lend to questions about what is the usefulness of DEI.
Exactly.
But I also wanted to go back and not to, you said that you don't want to just stay narrowly focused on education, but I do just got up this morning like reflecting on all of this and was really thinking about our trip to DC in April. We went to the National African American History and Cultural Museum, but we also visited the Mary McLeod Bethune House.
Right.
Now, she was an educator who was born a decade after the Civil War. And this is just taking me back to resilience, in particular, the resilience of Black people in this country who are the descendants of slaves.
Right.
Who my father was, and who you guys are obviously descendants of Black people and are Black men yourselves. So I think that when I look at her and look at her life experience and acknowledge the fact that to this day, right now, Bethune-Cookman College exists.
Right.
Because a woman who came from people who it was illegal for them to even read, somehow or another decided, out of her resilience and out of knowing that she could do what she did, went about doing it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think the sad part of that story is that I didn't know who she was, and I don't think that much of America knows who Mary McLeod Bethune is, which kind of goes back to not only education, but just you know, proper training and so forth. You know, take a look at this slide. So when we start talking about, you know, what it is we're here to correct, I think we need to come to terms with the fact, you know, before we get out in front of ourselves and say, hey, we've got some work to do. We can do some grassroots efforts in our community. We can definitely do the work, which we're doing. We're doing a lot of this work in our community. But I think a lot of us, we don't understand the magnitude and the source of the challenge. So you start to think about the fact that you've got all of these government-inflicted challenges that have created these wealth disparities over hundreds of years in America. And you've got judges sitting on the United States Supreme Court talking about, oh, well, should we do this to create diversity, or should we not do this? And that's why the program is diversity or justice. Are we talking about diversity, or are we talking about justice? Because all we're really talking about here is do we use a system to correct? Do we use a government to correct something that a government created? So I think that's where the United States Supreme Court and the legislature got lost in the sauce along the way, because now the conversation has been distilled all the way down to whether or not we're just getting excited, whether it's one criteria that colleges are using to make a decision for admission instead of saying, wait a minute, we need to be looking across all systems of state government and doing the work and correcting the mess that has been made.
Well, I mean, I guess I would also imagine that a concern comes up that when something like this happens, it ends up becoming legal precedent so that it opens the door to just continue to erode a lot of progress that's been made. So, I mean, I guess that would be another concern.
Yeah, definitely another concern. I know we're headed towards the end, but I did want to share with you a couple things that are relevant. And one is here with, just take a look at this here, that we'll pull this up real quick. We've got, there is different perspective on what it is we're doing. And I think this is worth noting because, you know, many of us, I've lived outside of the United States for 10 and a half years. So, you know, sometimes we got to take a step back and say, are we talking about civil rights or are we talking about human rights? You know, is this racial justice or are we talking about, you know, are we looking at United Nations observations? So next slide, please. So you take a look at that and what the United Nations is saying is we're talking about a crime against humanity. And they're saying that it needs to be addressed with reparatory justice. And this, what you're looking at right here is that that is from this report from the Working Group of Experts of People of African Descent. And the reason why I bring this up is so important for us to understand that it's not like we're not being urged to do the right thing. It's just that, you know, you've got this situation here in the United States where this nation, the way this nation was founded, as you said, Christine, it was founded on racist principles. And it has been throughout all history, as the pendulum has swung with the exception of the Warren Court, that we've had a majority conservative Supreme Court, and they've made some hugely lousy decisions historically. And I won't start going down cases because it just makes your eyes roll back.
I mean, one of the things that I noticed too about the side that you just brought up is that, you know, the United Nations, of course, was exactly right about what they were saying, and it was really a cry for our country to like finally address this. Not sure how many people actually heard that, but crimes against humanity, that's a pretty serious accusation. But some of the other language that was in that is saying, you know, xenophobia and a couple of other phobias. And another way to talk about a phobia is a fear. So what's the fear? What is it that people are afraid of? What is it in particular that white men who have always, you know, dominated and had the control in this country, what is it they are afraid of? I think that since day one, 400 plus years back, they have always been afraid of retribution. One of the reasons even Lincoln said, if we let them go, they're going to come get us. That's one thing. I think the other thing, and this is a little bit dangerous to say, but I think there's this thing about inferiority and superiority and being afraid of becoming irrelevant in the face of black excellence.
Replacement theory.
That, right, or that somehow or another, that black people will just, you know, take over the country if they're able to read or get a college degree or have some advantage that is perceived as unfair. So I think there's a lot, if you really, really want to drill down into it, those words, you know, phobias are fears. And we have to ask ourselves and maybe ask other people, what is it you're afraid of? What is it you're really afraid of?
Right. Yeah, there's that. And Roy, and you attended a HBCU, right?
Correct. Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama.
So I mean, how does this play into the HBCU world as we head towards a close? How does this decision, Supreme Court decision, or not? How does it play into this Supreme Court decision? How does it play into the HBCU role?
It plays exactly
about a minute.
in the manner in which Christine laid out things here, the fear factor, the denial factor, etc. Because in accepting and being fair, we see the expertise and that positive stuff that has been shared within our country. Well, then, if we're looking at that reality, the question arises, well, why have you kept all of that hidden? Why have you denied it?
Right.
Is it a fear factor? Is it something in your DNA, etc.? When the chips are down, whether it's sports or science, when you really want expertise, someone like George Washington Carver, there are many more like George Washington Carver, who can take something as small as a peanut and turn it into masterful, industrial and gainful this and that for the citizenry at part. Well, then you have to look in the mirror, and when you look in the mirror and you say, oh my God, you know, those people are great.
Absolutely.
Look at the sin which I am, and the meanness which I am, and the genocide which I am, and I am responsible for heaping upon not only African Americans, but Native Americans, so on and so forth.
Right.
So it's like looking at African American history and saying, African American history didn't start in 1619.
No, it didn't.
That history, that richness, that profound expertise was there long before.
Long before.
So some people find it very difficult, our white brothers and sisters in America in particular, to acknowledge that truth, that reality.
And black. I think I've come across you know, recently, you know, some black folks who just are not, because this is about our culture.
It's about our culture. And if I could say something here, it is that you don't have to be white to be a racist.
Okay.
That systemic belief, indoctrination, that hate factor, it says something about how you act and how you act upon others. If you hate yourself, then how can you love somebody else? And essentially,
Yeah, I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, but we're gonna do that on the next episode. Before we do close out, though, you know, the thing here is if we really process this thing, really, what it really comes down to is just like we're having a conversation about critical race theory, or whether we're having a conversation about, you know, fill in the blank, is that this is a question as to whether or not systemic racism is a thing. Because if systemic racism is a thing and it's acknowledged as a thing, and public policy acknowledges it as a thing, and the legislature and the executive and the judiciary acknowledge it as a thing, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because of course, like the United Nations said, it is imperative that we clean this mess up that has been created in America as a result of slavery. And it has lasted generation after generation. And what's ironic and what's kind of odd about it is that we've got so many things. We're going to flip through about 4 slides real quick here. And this is the first one. And you may recognize this one, Roy. This is state statute that Juneteenth is a thing in Vermont.
Amen.
Then you've got a proclamation. Of course, the governor proclaimed First African Landing Day. There's Juneteenth recognition in 2020. If you read this real close, there's language in there that says we need to do more to openly acknowledge the struggle for equality only began with the Civil War, and openly confront and eliminate the legacy of slavery is what it says on the third whereas from the bottom. The significant racial inequality and systemic racism that continues to exist in our country and our state today. This is the language that we have that's being communicated. The Reparations Task Force is a thing right here in Burlington. The resolution that racism is a public health emergency is a joint legislative resolution saying basically we're going to do everything that we can do. It's also a resolution of the city council, and it's a declaration of the city of Burlington with 30 other major designated agencies across the state. Thank you for those slides. So you've got this thing that's going on here that it's just as always, like Dr. King said, is I hear what you're saying, but you're not doing what you're saying. Right. You know, you're saying one thing, but you're doing another. So, you know, as we continue to go on, we march on, we continue the work. Last slide I have for you is as we go into this Juneteenth. Remember the first African landing slide I had up just a minute ago? Hold the date. Everybody that's watching, hold the date. First African Landing Day is back for its fifth consecutive time at the Intervale Center. It is on the 26th of August. Everybody's going to be there. There's going to be food, music, drumming. It is a commemoration, and this is to commemorate 1619. So be there or be square. If you want to talk about a little bit more, thank you for that slide, and we're closing. We want to talk a little bit more about what we're doing and some of the constitutional amendments that we're considering to address equal protection that will push directly back up against this affirmative action call, the constitutional amendments, and we didn't have time to cover them today. We will be at the Richard Kemp Center at 6 p.m. on the 19th. That's a week from tomorrow. We'll be at the Richard Kemp Center, and we'll be talking about organizing and getting some power behind those. So thank you for coming. I'm glad you came out. This has been Juxtaposition. This is a program that's all about black folks that are experiencing issues, and what we're doing is we're trying to push back, and we're doing it in our own way. I sure do appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you, Christine, for joining. Thank you, Roy, for joining. Good night.
Thank you.